When I started my channel a year ago, I never thought I'd be saying these words, American Assembled Watch. It sounds as unbelievable as saying they captured Bigfoot. And yet, here we are. All the way from Fountain Hills, Arizona, just across the street from the pickleball courts, this is the island of BethPage, model number ISL-201. At the time of this video, you can pick up this watch at longislandwatch.com for $349 US. Now, full disclosure, Mark and Ryan at Long Island were nice enough to send me this watch for review, and I will be sending it back to them once my video is done. That said, you of course still get my full and honest review, just like you always do. Hey everyone, today we are going to look at this black dial version of this chronograph. Now it comes in these two colorways plus a black coated PVD version. Now chronographs are definitely not for everyone, and there are some people out there who will automatically discard this watch because of some of the design choices that have been made. And I have to admit, a year ago, I might have been one of those people. Now my personal watch collection today, about half of them are chronographs. And after owning so many, I think I understand why Mark from Long Island Watch made the design decisions that he did. But let's take a closer look, hear my rationale, and you can decide for yourself whether or not you agree. Hey everyone, if you are enjoying these videos, please do me a favor and consider subscribing. It would really help out the channel. Now let's get on with the review. The case construction is 316L stainless steel with a diameter coming in at 41.5 millimeters, measuring from 9 o'clock to the side of the crown. On the side, we have a lug-to-lug distance of a nice and compact 47 millimeters and an overall thickness of 14 millimeters. Now the end links do stick out a little further past the case, making it an effective 51 millimeter lug-to-lug. But as you can see, I had no issues wearing this on my 7-inch wrist. And actually, in my opinion, it wears small. In part due to that black bezel commanding so much attention and measuring in at 39 millimeter diameter. Now I don't normally comment a lot on the case shape, but I have to say that this is simply beautiful. I love the design of this case. The way it curves around the center of the watch, the generous high polish area on top of the case, and the way it meets up with the bracelet. I can't get past this transition from case to bracelet. It just feels like the case completely nestles the end link. And I know some people are pointing out that it's similar to the Speedy, but personally, I haven't seen a case like this on an affordable watch before. The finishing on the watch is very nicely done. Everything looks and feels refined. The side of the case, as well as the inside of the lugs, has been given this brushed finish, while the top of the case, as I said before, has a high polish treatment. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you know that having a different direction of brushing on the lugs than the bracelet bothers me to no end. But given this case shape, it's really not an issue here. It's not actually noticeable given the steep angle of the lugs, and it somehow just works. There are absolutely no sharp edges or corners to be found here. It is exactly what you'd hope for on a watch in this price point. Turning it over, on the back of the watch, we have an exhibition screw-down case back, which is unusual to say the least. I have never seen an exhibition case back on a quartz watch, and I never thought I would. Obviously, they want to highlight the fact that this watch movement is assembled in the US. Around the case back, we have text that reads USA Assembly, Islander, Amerigraph Sapphire, 100 meters, as well as an icon of the American flag. Now this exhibition case back on a quartz gets us into some of those design decisions I was talking about earlier. I think chronographs actually have two functions. One is the obvious time tracking function, and the other might be less obvious, and it's simply aesthetics. It just adds to the overall look. Now, some people will say that a chronograph that doesn't put the time tracking function ahead of everything else is ridiculous. Why even have a chronograph then? Well, here's my rationale. Half of my personal collection are chronographs, and when I stop to think about how many times this entire year I've had a need to use the chronograph function, my answer, honestly, 0, none. And we are more than halfway through the year. But I have still worn my watches every day, not for the chronograph function, obviously, but because I love the way that they look. With that in mind, is an exhibition case back on a quartz such a crazy idea? Sure, there's not as much to see as on an automatic watch, but it's about aesthetics. It still adds something to the watch overall. And they were smart enough to dress it up in this gold metallic color. Moving on, that quartz movement inside is the Ameriquartz 7C01 movement, and that is a 5-joule movement, which is fully serviceable and has a frequency of 32,768 Hz. There's an estimated 36-month battery life, and it is rated for plus or minus 20 seconds per month. Now, in my personal experience, this particular watch is less than a half of a second slow per day, according to my watch app. At the 3 o'clock position, we have a signed crown with the Islander logo. It is roughly 6.5 millimeters in width and 3.5 millimeters in depth. I found it easy to grip and to pull out. This is a simple push-pull crown. Pulling the crown out all the way hacks the second hand and sets the time. Now, I do need to point something out here. This movement inside is a no date movement, which, makes sense because the watch does not have a date function. That said, when I pull the crown out, I still feel a 2-click position. Technically, it's not a ghost position, since they are using a no date movement. For lack of a better term, I'm going to call it a hiccup. My guess is that the crown or stem may be catching on something and causing it to have a 2-click pullout. It's unfortunate. Most people would never have given this a second thought. But in my videos, I try to point out all of the little things that I discover during my everyday experience with a watch, so that you can decide for yourself whether or not it's a big deal. Moving on to the face of the watch, starting with the fixed bezel with ceramic black insert displaying military time. We have Arabic numbers counting from 13 to 24, which are loomed with C3, as are the tick marks in between the numbers. Now, even though those numbers are small, there is a high amount of contrast here between the white numbers and the black bezel, keeping things legible. This fixed 24-hour bezel is another one of those design choices I was talking about. Yeah, it's a little unusual again, but I do think it adds something to the watch overall. Now, the rationale here is that this watch is named after the town, BethPage, where the Apollo lunar module was built and designed. It's pretty safe to say they were using military time on that mission. Moving on to the dial itself, we have a red color minute track printed on white, and inside of that, we have applied metallic indices on a brushed black dial, and those indices are filled with C3 superluminova. Now, those rectangle indices go all around the dial, with the 3, 6, and 9 o'clock positions being cut short to make room for the subdials. And at the 12 o'clock position, those rectangle indices have been doubled up side by side to emphasize the full hour marker. Also, at the 12 o'clock position, we have the Islander logo printed in white. Now, what I really appreciate about this ISL-201 model is the high contrast everywhere on this watch, with 2 exceptions. The use of red text on a black dial was just not a great choice. Below the Islander logo, the word Amerigraph appears, and on the subdial at the 3 o'clock position, USA movement is also printed red on black. Now, in my opinion, these are simply not legible to the naked eye. There are 3 subdials on this watch. At the 3 o'clock position, we have a 24-hour indicator. Not the most useful of subdials, but again, the guys at Long Island Watch had a little fun with it and rotated the numbers so the 12 is at the top, and they made the evening hours black. It kind of gives it this flying level airplane gauge feel to it, and I think it adds something to the overall aesthetics. At the 9 o'clock, we have a 60-minute counter for the chronograph. And at the 6 o'clock position, we have what is sure to be the biggest issue for some people because this subdial is the chronograph hand. Now, normally a chronograph would make use of the large center hand for the chrono feature, but here, the subdial is used instead. And along with that decision goes all of the obvious things. It's smaller, it's harder to read, it could be covered up by the minute or hour hand, depending on the time of day. And it raises the question, why would you relegate the chronograph function to second fiddle on a chronograph watch? Again, I think I understand, because I have yet to use the chrono feature on any of my watches this year. But I do like being able to glance at the watch, see the seconds tick by, and know that it is keeping time. So personally, I think this design choice was based on how the majority of us use a watch on a daily basis. In one of Mark's videos, I remember him saying, listen to the customer, they will tell you what they want to purchase. And that makes me wonder if this decision was based on customer feedback. Hey Mark, if you're watching, leave a comment and let us know why you made these decisions. Moving on to the hands, both the second hand and minute hand is nicely sized and meets up with the edge of the black dial and minute track. The hands are nice and high polished with a bevel edge to them, helping them to catch the light. And all of the hands here are filled with C3 Superluminova. This watch easily passed my everyday Lume test. Now for anyone who doesn't know, my Lume test consists of wearing a watch, getting an average amount of light exposed to it during the day, setting aside my bedside table, and then seeing if I can tell the time at 4 in the morning. And again, this watch easily passed. So we need to talk about the chronograph pushers. As you'd expect, the top pusher starts and stops the chrono, and the bottom one resets it to 0. Now there's one thing that bumps me out here, and that is the lack of any audio or tactile feel to the pusher. There is no clicking noise, and there's no feel of resistance and release. The only indicator that you have successfully activated the chrono is to visually see the hand on the subdial moving. I know this is a new movement, and I'm sure there'll be future improvements made. My guess is that this would be one of the areas that they improve upon. For a crystal, this watch comes with a domed sapphire with AR coating inside. In my personal experience, I found this watch performed well outside with only minor reflections going on. And that brings us to the bracelet. It is 20 millimeters wide at the lugs and tapers down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. It is a sign clasp with an etching of the lunar module, another nod to the town of BethPage. It also has a photo for safety, double push button release, and 3 micro adjustments. Inside, we have a milled scissor section. Now the edges on the clasp and the bracelet are nicely finished off, and there are no sharp edges here. For the bracelet itself, we have solid links as well as solid end links, and it's held together with screw pins. There is a very good articulation here, and it's really comfortable on wrist. In my opinion, this is one of the nicest bracelets you're going to get for this price range. Now some companies would skimp out on a bracelet, cut corners to keep costs down, but not here, not Mark. They made a quality watch and they paired it with a quality bracelet. So let's list out the specs for this watch. We have a sapphire crystal, the Amerigraph C701 movement, a diameter of 41.5 millimeters when measuring from 9 o'clock to the side of the crown, thickness of 14 millimeters, a lug width of 20 millimeters, a lug-to-lug distance of 47 millimeters, and finally a water resistance of 100 meters. And finally, let's go over the pros and cons. For pros, aesthetics. It is a good-looking, original design. The case shape helps it to wear small. There is a sapphire crystal. It is very legible with high contrast everywhere. A good fit and finish. there's a good quality bracelet, and I think it's designed for fun. I mean, there's a lunar rover on the bracelet, the 24-hour dial looks like an airplane gauge, and you got that 24-hour bezel. Now for cons, the push buttons have no tactile feel to them, and the crown has a hiccup to it. So my final thoughts on this watch. Of course, there are some things here that could be improved upon, but I have to give Mark a lot of credit for creating something that, in my opinion, we don't see enough of. An original design with quality components at an affordable price. Okay, my friends, that is it. Until the next video, remember, buy whatever it is that you love. This is your watch collection after all. I'll see you next time.